All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Boylan. I'm with Georgia EPD in the Air Protection Branch, and today I'm going to be talking about prescribed fires and air quality in Georgia. An overview is I'm going to talk about ozone and PM 2.5 trends, the PM NAX review that is currently being updated, recent PM 2.5 NAX exceedances, and then EPD is making some changes to their open burning rules, and I'll talk about those. So first, ozone and PM 2.5 trends. And when I say ozone, I'm not talking about stratospheric ozone or the ozone layer. This is ozone down in the ground that we all breathe in and is very harmful to our respiratory systems. And PM 2.5 are very small particles in the air. So these are the ozone design value trends. So this includes the highest monitor in each of the MSA areas in Georgia. What you can see is the standard of 70 is the red line, and that all of the monitors are well below the 70, except for the Atlanta area monitor, which was above 70. It hit 70 at the end of 2020, and as of 2021 was a couple of ppbs below. Back in February of this year, we actually submitted a redesignation request to basically redesignate the Atlanta area from non-attainment back to attainment for ground level ozone, and we're waiting for EPA to act on that designation request. For PM 2.5, we have monitors all across the state. You can see them here. They're in most of the larger urban areas across the state, as well as some smaller areas. We have different types of monitors. We have the FRM monitors that are filter-based, where they basically collect 24 hours and then it's taken to be weighed. Those filters, we don't get hour-by-hour information. We also have what are called FEM, Federal Equivalency Method monitors, FEMs that do measure continuously. We get that information live, and you can actually see all that on our website live as it happens, and it's hour-by-hour information for PM 2.5. I also want to talk about the difference between an exceedance and a violation of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So the exceedance is any time the 24-hour value of PM 2.5 measures greater than 35 micrograms per cubic meter. And as I talk about, that happens quite frequently. A violation of the NAX, there's two NAX, National Ambient Air Quality Standards for PM 2.5. There's the annual NAX, and basically the annual average averaged over 3 years is greater than 12 micrograms per cubic meter. And then there's the daily NAX. So that's the 98th percentile of 24-hour values averaged over 3 years is greater than 35 micrograms. And I'll talk more about what the 98th percentile is, because it actually depends on the number of samples that you take each year. But the point here is that you can have multiple exceedances of the NAX without ever having a violation of the NAX. And as I'll talk about, that's what we're seeing right now. So these are trends in the PM 2.5 values across the state of Georgia. Again, it's the highest monitor in each of the MSAs where we measure. This is the annual standard of 12 micrograms per cubic meter. And when you compare against the NAX, it's a 3-year average. So the most recent values we have on here are 2019 to 2021. What we can see is some increasing trends. We have the highest value here in Augusta. You can see it's at 11 micrograms per cubic meter, which is still below the 12. However, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, EPA is likely lowering the annual standard, and it's likely going to be lowered from 12 to possibly 10, could be even lower. For the daily PM 2.5 standard, again, we have values that are well below the current standard of 35 micrograms per cubic meters. We have some values increasing. However, in 2021, we did have some high values, and I'll talk about that. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about EPA's NAX review. So the NAX, the PM NAX, it includes PM 2.5, PM 10, is currently under review by the EPA, and the way this works is the EPA staff put together an integrated science assessment and a policy assessment, And in that policy assessment, the EPA staff make recommendations as to if the current standard is adequate or not adequate. And if it's not adequate, they recommend some ranges for the new standard. So in the draft policy assessment, the EPA staff said the annual standard was not low enough. 12 was not adequate, and it needed to be lowered. The CASAC, which is a scientific member body that actually provides advice to the EPA on the level of the standards, consists of 7 people in the chartered CASAC. I'm one of the 7 people, so I have firsthand knowledge in the deliberations of the CASAC. I'm the only representative from state agencies. The other 6 are university professors from across the country. All 7 of us agreed with EPA that the standard of 12 is not adequate and needed to be lowered. However, 6 of the CASAC members thought the level that it should be lowered to was not a consensus. So 6 of the CASAC members recommended 8 to 10 micrograms per cubic meter, and 1 of the CASAC members recommended a range of 10 to 11 micrograms. In EPA's final policy assessment, they again said 12 is not adequate, but they did not recommend a level. They basically left it open. So the next step is for the EPA administrator to basically look at this information and make a decision. Like I said, it will be lowered. The question is, how low will it go? And like I said, my guess is it's going to be 10. For the daily standard, the daily PM2.5 standard, the EPA staff in their draft recommendations said that this current standard of 35 was adequate and did not need to be lowered. During the CASAC deliberations, 6 of the CASAC members disagreed and said it needed to be lowered to a range of 25 to 30 micrograms per cubic meter, and 1 of the CASAC members said that agreed with EPA, saying that the current standard of 35 was adequate. You can guess which one was the one that agreed with EPA. And then the final staff conclusion was that the current standard of 35 was adequate. Again, now it's being turned over to the EPA administrator to go through the rulemaking process and make the final decision. So this is a schedule of basically the rulemaking. Like I talked about the CASAC deliberations. Next is the rulemaking. EPA is going to propose the new standards in the summer of this year, of 2022, and then the final rulemaking will be in the spring of 2023. And after the new standard is set, the next step is for designations. So the states make designation recommendations to the EPA, and that will occur 1 year after the new standard is set, so in 2024, and that will be based on 2021, 2022, and 2023 data, because for comparison to the NAX, you need a 3-year average, and those will be the 3 most recent years available at the time the state of Georgia makes its recommendation to EPA. Then EPA gets 1 year to make their final decision, and so they actually will be looking at the newer data of 2022, 2023, and 2024. So the point here is that for the state recommendations, 2021 data that's already in the books is important because that's going to be weighted and included for the next 3 years. 2022 and 2023 data are important, and 2024 data is important because this is all going to weigh into whether areas are designated non-attainment or attainment. The question I always get is, well, if an area is designated non-attainment, what does that mean? So what that means is that Georgia EPD must submit an attainment state implementation plan to EPA describing how the area that was designated non-attainment will get back into attainment. Attainment SIPs are usually contain new emission control requirements for the sources associated with the violation of the NAX. So this is recent data for the annual standard. This is just looking at 2019, 2020, and 21 data on a year-by-year basis, not a 3-year average. And what you can see is the 2021 data is showing increases compared to the last couple of years. In fact, we have the one monitor in Augusta showing in 2021 was 12 micrograms per cubic meter. So now we got to think about if the standards drop to 10 to get a 3-year average of 10 or below, the next 2 years are going to have to be at 9 micrograms per cubic meter for the next 2 years to be able to get that average down to 10. And then we also have some other monitors where the 2021 values were over 10 micrograms. For the daily standard, we actually had some high numbers in 2021 as well. Augusta, the 98th percentile value was at 38. In Columbus, it was right at 35. So again, these numbers are going to be included in the average for the next 3 years. These are actually the actual numbers here. So the point is there are a number of areas that if the standard is lowered, the annual standard is lowered to 10, there's a number of areas where over the next few years, their 3-year average could be over 10. And if it's over 10, they could potentially be designated non-attainment. Same with the daily standard. We have a couple of high values there as well. So next I'm going to talk about some recent PM 2.5 NAX exceedances. This is a list from 2021. So each time we have a NAX exceedance, whether for any pollutant, whether it's ozone, PM 2.5, SO2, NO2, lead, and any of the NAX, for any of the pollutants, we actually do a deep dive into the cause of this. We look at the meteorology, we look at the emissions, we look at the air quality, and we write a report, usually anywhere from 3 to 10 pages within the next 2 to 3 business days after we get the exceedance. So this is just a summary of the 2021 exceedances. Actually, this is half of them. So as you go through here, you can see that for PM 2.5, the exceedances are usually associated with prescribed fires. As we go through the list, we see prescribed fires. We do see a couple of exceedances associated with July 4th fireworks. We had one in United Avenue, which is downtown Atlanta, that was linked to diesel truck emissions. But as you can see, the majority of the exceedances are due to prescribed fires. This is for 2022. So 2022 have been much fewer exceedances compared to 2021. So that's good news. We can see them listed here. You can see that Albany has had 5 exceedances, and Sandersville has had 3 exceedances. So 98th percentile, I talked about this. So this depends on the number of values you have. So if you have 100 measurements, the 98th percentile is going to be the second highest value. But if you collect a sample every single day, 365 days of the year, you're way down at the bottom, and the 98th percentile will be your 8th highest value out of 365 values. So in 2021, these are our high values. We had a lot of exceedances in 2021. Augusta had some higher values. Based on the number of samples that was taken, the 98th percentile in Augusta was the 7th highest value. So you can see the different values counted down to the 7th value, which is 38 micrograms per cubic meter. The other one that's over is Columbus. Columbus is a 1 in 3 monitor. It's not taken every day. Also, the monitor was down for about 2 months during the year. So we only had 99 samples taken at Columbus. And so that means our 98th percentile value is the second highest value, which is 35, is shown here. And so that one's going to be stuck in our 3-year average for the next 3 years. In 2022, basically the monitor that's got hit the most has been Albany. We've had 5 exceedances in Albany so far. If we have values, 365 values, we get the eighth highest. So far, it's ever since March, it's been good. We haven't had any exceedances. And like I said, Sandersville has had 3 exceedances. So as part of our reports, I'm going to go through a bunch of these quickly. These are for 2022. We create a number of graphics that help us understand the cause of the fires. I'll talk about this first one a little bit, then go through the others quickly. But what this shows is a graphic of the area with the exceedance. So this is Sandersville on January 31st of 2022. What the graph contains is the blue lines are high split back trajectories for each of the hours that was measured to be above 35 micrograms per cubic meter, and basically tracks the parcels of airs backwards to see where it came from. Also included on here, the gray. As you can see, the darker gray and the lighter gray are fire plumes from the NOAA HMS model. So we have that on there. Then we also have the red triangles are Georgia Forestry Commission's permitted fire acreage, and the bigger the triangle, the more acreage was permitted by GFC. And then the red squares are satellite detected fires that may or may not have been fires issued by GFC. So all this information is included on the graph. And then down in the corner, we have a time series plot, hour by hour, of the concentration of PM2.5. So in this example, you can see that this exceedance on January 31st, you can see the spike in the evening. So it was probably a fire that occurred during the day, and then the plume transported into the evening, lower mixing heights, and allowed for high values that led to an exceedance on this date. The next day, February 1st, is actually a continuation here, where at the Sandersville monitor, that same plume that caused the exceedance on January 31st also caused an exceedance on February 1st. As you can see, it started to decline in the early morning hours of February 1st, and then the values stay low the rest of the day. What we also see here is Columbus, and in the blue line, and you can see Columbus starts out lower in the morning, and then it has a double peak, and so that's likely due to fires that occurred at Columbus on that day. So we can go through all of these for 2022, and I'll just click through them one at a time. This is an exceedance at Sandersville on February 15th, February 27th, March 2nd, and this was actually a 3-day episode here that we're looking at. So this is March 2nd, and we can see that Albany is the monitor that get hit. And this was caused by, you can actually see that the number started to increase at midnight from the day before. So this was probably fires from the day before that actually transported or sat overnight and then hit the monitor early in that morning when the mixing height was low. And then later in the day, you see it start to go back up. So this exceedance was caused probably by fires on the previous day as well as fires on the current day. Same with March 3rd, again at Albany, showing a 54. And then on this day, we actually had 3 monitors all go above the standard, including Albany, Brunswick, and Warner Robins. And in some cases, it was likely due to the fires on the previous day being carried over onto this day. And then March 29th was the last fire, the last exceedance so far in 2022. And in this case, we can see this is at Albany, where you start getting the high values early in the morning hours, likely transport from the day before, goes down in the day, and then it comes back up later in the day, which is likely due to fires that were on that day. So this is a combination of fires from the day before and fires the day of. The other thing I didn't point out is we actually show fires from both days on here. The ones in the red are the current day, and the one in orange are from the previous day. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is open burning rule updates for Georgia EPD. So the way our rules are written basically says, thou shalt not burn anything except for these 13 types of legal burns. And the 13 types of legal burns are listed here. Number 1 is reduction of leaves on premises of origin. And I mentioned that one specifically because we're making a change to that one. And then number 4 is prescribed burning. So that's kind of why we're all here, is to talk about prescribed burning. So exception number 4 is prescribed burning. So based on what county you are in and based on the season of the year, there's different restrictions apply. So this is kind of a summary map of those 13 burn types that are allowed. And then based on what county you're in, and this is what is called the summer burn ban, May 1st through September 30th, you can see the green counties that are close to Atlanta have restrictions. And under the burn types allowed, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, and 12. So burn type number 4 is not allowed, prescribed burning, no prescribed burning in those green counties during the summer months. Also, land clearing burnings are not allowed because land clearing is burn type 11 and burn type number 13. I'll go back. 11 is land clearing, and then 13 is land clearing with an ACD. And then what happens in the gray counties is Basically, you can do prescribed burning in the gray counties, but you cannot do land clearing burning. And then all the white counties, you can do all 13 types during the summer. A subcategory of these, as we go into the basically October 1st through April 30th, there's some additional restrictions. So if you're in one of these counties that is green or gray and your population is greater than 65,000 based on the latest census, there's some additional burn restrictions, and those counties are shown in the gray. And one reason we bring this up is because the 2020 census recently came out, and 3 counties who were below 65,000 went above 65,000. And those 3 counties are Spalding, Jackson, and Catoosa. And so by default, those 3 counties actually got additional restrictions. And the additional restriction is that they can only do land clearing burning with an ACD. So if you look at the types listed here, type 11 is not listed, which type 11 was land clearing without an ACD. But 13 is listed. So these 3 counties now must use an ACD when they do land clearing. We didn't think that that was right, and so we're basically in the process of changing the rule to change it back so that those 3 counties are removed from these additional requirements. So these are the rule changes that we're currently in the process of making. The first is, I talked about our first exception was reduction of leaves on premises, and we're changing leaves to leaf piles, yard debris, and hand-piled natural vegetation. And one of the reasons this came about was Ken Parker called me up and said, if someone cuts down a tree in their yard and cuts it up, can they burn it? According to our rules, the answer was no. We all thought the answer should be yes, and so we are changing the rule to allow additional flexibility under basically the first allowance of 1. So now it's going to be leaf piles, yard debris, which include branches and limbs, and hand-piled natural vegetation. This also matches the wording that GFC uses for their burning. So the second change we're making is for the specific county. So it's basically undoing the 3 counties that were put in here. So this was based on the latest census data. So in our rule, we're changing the latest census data, we're changing it to the 2010 census data. Because the whole reason this was brought in was because of ozone and PM 2.5 non-attainment areas. And we had identified these specific counties as the ones that needed the additional restrictions to allow our areas to either come into attainment or remain in attainment with the ozone and the PM 2.5 standards. And we did not think the addition of these 3 new counties was needed. And so we're actually in the process of changing the latest census to the 2010 census, and then we're also listing the counties in the rule to make it crystal clear that it's all the counties here and the one circled in red are not going to be listed. So basically those 3 that were added by default are now being removed. The DNR board was briefed on these rule updates on April 26th. There's actually, this is out for public comment now on this, and then we will be proposing this for adoption to the DNR board on August 23rd. And then what will happen is if the DNR board approves it, these rules will become effective about a month after that and will be published in the Secretary of State. And that's my contact information. Thank you.
Quick question for Jim, anybody? One in the back.
Hey, Jim, I know we've discussed this a little bit on calls over the last several years, but from the regulatory side, well, most of our speakers and most of our partners have talked about increasing prescribed burn acreage. From the regulatory side, how do we increase prescribed burn acreage without impacting the air quality restraints?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, we're going to be, EPD is going to be setting up a meeting with Georgia Forestry Commission to talk about that exact issue, because we at Georgia EPD are in favor of increasing prescribed burning, and we understand the benefits of that. We just need to figure out a way to increase prescribed burning and minimize the impacts of smoke. So whether it's through meteorology, or other ways to basically figure out the best times to do the burning where, you know, the smoke is not going into the urban areas and things like that. So that is something we're going to work with GFC on and possibly come up with some recommendations, because none of us want, I know you guys don't want non-attainment areas. We do not want non-attainment areas. And so the best case scenario is, you know, we don't have the high values at the monitors, and the whole state remains in attainment. And so yes, we're going to be working with GFC to come up with some ideas for that. All right, thank you.
Let me give you this. This is your phone, council.
Oh, great, thank you.